Welcome in, everyone. As we let more people in, we will just give it a moment to get things started. Really excited to have you with us today. My name is Muhi Huaja. I am a trainer at Fundraising Academy. So we'll just give it another moment as more people trickle in.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we are going to be talking about future-proofing your nonprofit, strategic planning for sustainable growth in 2025. This is a very timely topic. And as we are all in the middle of year-end fundraising, we are also looking forward to what we are going to be doing next year. And to further get into that, I'm going to share a little bit more about Fundraising Academy. If this is your first webinar with us, Fundraising Academy is headquartered at National University and it is a cost-selling education program which provides education and training fundraisers throughout the US and beyond. Through online and in-person workshops, Fundraising Academy trains emerging fundraisers to deepen relationships with individuals through a cost-selling cycle and ultimately increase revenue for their causes. My name, as I mentioned, is Muhi Huaja, and I am a lifelong fundraising professional. I've been a one-person development team, a chief development officer for a national organization, a major gift officer for large nonprofits like the American Red Cross, and I've also started a nonprofit called the American Muslim Community Foundation. I've been blessed to be with Fundraising Academy as a trainer since 2022. And it is a pleasure of mine to be moderating today's discussion, and more importantly, to be introducing my friend and colleague, Jarrett Ransom. She is somebody who is deeply talented in the fundraising and the nonprofit space. She is a consultant, president, and CEO of the Raven Group, known as the Nonprofit Nerd. I'm going to let her share a little bit more about herself, but we were hanging out in Arizona just a few weeks ago. So thank you for your hospitality and your friendship, Jarrett.
Yeah, absolutely, Muhi. I feel the same. We've certainly shared that with one another. So grateful to be here today and truly honoring that title of nonprofit nerd. As you see, I wear it proudly with the glasses in real life and in photos. And thanks for that nudge on your nose piece there, Muhi, right on cue. Well, welcome. Really glad to have all of you here. I am pretty casual in just about everything I do, including webinar presentations. So I really do encourage all of you to participate. I know this is a busy time of year. I am right there with you. I'm helping to manage several different end of year fundraising campaigns for a handful of my clients. So I understand, setting aside some time right now to be in this conversation is probably a heavy lift. So we've got a lot of things to cover today, which you can see right here on the screen, what that will look like. But I'm really going to dive in, or as I like to say, nerd out over some cause selling integration, sustainable growth strategies. I'm going to talk a little bit about how sustainable has become a buzzword in our sector and maybe, help to define what that means for you. And then also share one of the things that, I love to talk about is rinse, repeat, and recycle your content. It might seem pretty basic, and you will see throughout today's webinar presentation, many of these things might, have you tilting your head going, okay, that is so 101, right? Like that is pretty basic. And that's what I want to share is that we don't have to overcomplicate. We can go back to basics. And I'm going to go ahead and give you that permission slip now that we really can look at some of the most simplistic ways to move forward. And then, of course, looking at our data. Data is sexy and data-driven decision making. Sorry, that was my Southern accent cutting off that, that letter. But decision making is very powerful. And when you integrate all these together, you will certainly launch, 2025 to be a successful year. So as I mentioned, I'm very casual in style. Muhi is going to help manage the chat, the Q&As. We do have time at the very end to answer, specific questions. We also have 2 polls during today's presentation. So again, if you're multitasking, I get it. If you can please participate, we certainly encourage you to do that. So, all right, well, let's dive right in, because one of the things I like to share is, I started in the sector about 20 plus years ago, and I had no idea that this cause selling integration model, or the cause selling model, I should say, existed, right? I wish that I had this model when I started 20 plus years ago. The good news is I have it now. You have it now. Maybe this is the first time seeing it. Or maybe you, like many others, have already integrated this into your organization, into your practices. If so, kudos, phenomenal. I love to hear that. So it makes perfect sense to me, this model. So again, 3 phases, 8 steps, and I will be sharing a little bit about how each of these 8 steps integrate truly into building donor loyalty. I find this model to be, as I mentioned, pretty, I want to say natural. Like, I didn't realize that I was naturally doing some of these things already without having the introduction to cause selling model. However, what I have noticed is that board members really love this model because they can visually see it and they can start to understand. The other thing too is now that I have this model, I no longer, fall back on like just kind of doing things naturally. I now do it in a very system approached way, thanks to these 8 steps. So looking back, I was like, wow, that's great to know that I guess somehow naturally, intuitively, perhaps, put this together. But again, great approach to so many different things. I mentioned donor loyalty and how these 8 steps will show up. Well, here you go. On this slide, there are 8 different ways. Find the donor's name would be in prospecting. Gathering that information that you need is part of your pre-approach. Introduce themselves to the donor. So that's part of the approach step. Discover your donor's unique passions. Need discovery, right? Because you're discovering what it is they need by way of alignment with your mission and alignment with their passions. You also, presentation is here when it comes to telling the story of your mission. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can leverage that storytelling and really build exponentially on this donor loyalty. Overcome potential roadblocks to giving. This is objections. And I find this one fascinating. I always like to ask people, what is your favorite step? And when I hear objections from people, that just tells me they're a very special person. I've got to say, like Jack Alato, one of our other dear friends, I want to say objections is one of his favorites. So he helped me reframe objections. So maybe like many of you, you fear your donors or your prospective donors saying no, or like, presenting some roadblocks as to why they wouldn't consider that gift. So objections is a great way to really nurture that relation further, not necessarily see that as a no, but to see that as a way that we can truly redesign, how we're speaking to this donor, maybe what we're presenting to this donor, and really niching into that passion alignment. So if any of you are also like, who likes objections? Maybe that reframe will help you as well, because it certainly did for me. And again, shout out to Jack. Ask for a gift. Obviously, that's part of the ask step. And then the 8th example that I have here, and all of this to build donor loyalty, is to follow up with results for that fostering, opportunity. So that obviously is stewardship. We all need loyal donors, truly. And when
Absolutely.
when we look at donor retention, it is going down, and that is scary. I know we've all talked about this when it's like, hey, what if you go to your favorite restaurant and you never go back the next year, right? And so many people do that. That to me is a prime example of how donor loyalty, repeat customers, repeat clients really show up. So integrating cause selling into your systems will really help to build out that loyalty. So all right, Muhi, I think we have a poll coming up. This is our first of the 2. But I want to hear from all of you here. I know we're still pushing through those end of year campaigns. And right now I'm asking you to go ahead and look into 2025. That might be hard for some of you, but let me know the strategies that are top priority for your organization. I just want to kind of get a feel for how we're showing up today and what we're looking forward to in 2025. I see some great responses coming in. It looks like several are looking at that sustainable growth. So that's great to hear. And then the other bucket that's getting some responses is that enhanced decision-making through data. So great. That's really wonderful to hear that sustainable growth and decision-making through data are two of your top priorities. So really glad to hear that. I think you're on the right track, right, for next year. And again, I'm going to share a little bit about sustainability, maybe, help you shape what that looks like for you. So, all right. Well, thanks for playing with that poll. We have one more. And so that will show up here a little bit later. All right. Well, moving right ahead, what I want to share next is into this space of sustainable growth strategies. Let me get this poll off my page. I told you that thing's a tricky one for me. Okay, so examples of sustainable growth strategies. I want to say, I know that this word sustainable is not new, right? And it really has become what I believe as a buzz, term in our industry. So I would really like to know from, all of you here, maybe use that chat box. How do you define sustainable, right? Like, what does sustainability or sustainable growth strategies, what does that mean to you? And if any of you are willing to participate, and again, just kind of jot that down in the chat. I think, hearing from other people here in our industry, I'm all about shared knowledge. And I know I'm certainly not the smartest one here on this webinar. So I would love to hear from many of you what that's looking like for you and your organization, maybe you and your community. This is often a question that comes up, for grants or funders. So I just love to know, how do you respond to that? And maybe as you're writing that in the chat, I will share some examples right here from the slide of what I believe are some sustainable growth strategies that you might want to consider. So the first one, of course, is to prioritize that donor retention over acquisition. We all know, and if we don't, we're going to hear it over and over and over again, that it costs us a lot more money to acquire new donors than to keep our donors loyal, happy, and engaged. So prioritizing truly that retention over acquisition could be one of those sustainable growth strategies. The other one is to segment and target your audience. So I heard a really interesting point the other day from another colleague. They live in California, but she talked a lot about segmenting and targeting your audiences and how there's so many, multiple ways in which you can do this. I've certainly been using that for my end of year, and we can look at that further into 2025. Maybe it's your first time donors, maybe it's your consistent donors, your monthly donors, your major donors, maybe your event attendees that are not quite, this might be disruptive, not quite yet a donor beyond an event, right? So like, how might we move that donor from a pure event attendee only into also, giving of their financial contributions, because then we can also steward them differently. Maybe you want to enhance your major gift program. And I'll also share, I work with many clients. Some of them, their major gift amount is $1,000. Some of them it's $25,000. So depending on what your major gift program looks like, that there might be a great opportunity to enhance that. Diversification of revenue streams. The biggest that I see still coming up, and I'm so grateful for this, is a fee-based program. So this could be earned revenue. This could be something that you sliding scale, but you're bringing in some revenue through your program and charging small, or different amounts for that program, depending on your community, your stakeholders, and kind of what that looks like. This is a favorite of mine, is to build that internal capacity. I feel like as an organization, or as organizations, I should say, across the sector, is many of us are working in skeleton staffs, which means we are not staffed adequately for what we need to achieve. And so we, of course, are wearing multiple hats, serving in multiple roles, really responsible for a lot. But how might you build that internal capacity? That might be part of a sustainable growth strategy that you consider into 2025. And then, of course, perhaps one of your favorite or your most dreaded is, how do you engage those board members in your fundraising? And all of these are great examples that you could consider. You don't have to pick all of them. Maybe you pick one, maybe you pick a couple, but really would love to hear and see what that looks like. All right, moving right along into that storytelling, because I said we were going to talk about leveraging. Again, storytelling is not a new strategy. We all do it. Some do it better than others. Some of us have better stories to tell, right? Different data to represent. So leveraging your storytelling, could look like a lot of this: reinforcing that message, creating that memorable impression, perhaps reaching a wider range of people, enhancing engagement as well as that understanding, and strengthening the emotional connection. I mentioned this here, and again, back to basics. Now is the time to look at your storytelling for next year. And I'm going to say that's regardless of whether you are a July 1 fiscal start, a January 1 fiscal start, or somewhere in between. Really looking at your storytelling. How might you leverage the storytelling, the success, the images? There's so many ways, to do this. And so as you look ahead into next year, ask yourself where you can strengthen your stories. How do they show up, right? It could be email marketing campaigns. It could be social media, maybe that annual report. But I want you to leverage these storytelling opportunities. And again, perhaps using some of these ways and examples here to do that, so that we can really, kick up into high gear for next year. I'm curious from many of you, and maybe you can just answer this, on your own, but many of my clients are seeing a diverse response, or I should say a different response for their end of year. Some are crushing it and doing quite well, exceeding, that gala goal. Others are seeing kind of trickles of money coming in still for that end of year. So some of you are celebrating the successes that we're seeing fundraising wise, revenue wise right now, while others are scratching their head going, what is going on? Because I haven't changed anything, right? In our storytelling, haven't changed anything in our messaging. So I'm hearing across the sector, and Muhi, I'm going to put you on the spot, my friend, but I'm curious what you're seeing and hearing, because here in Phoenix, right, I am getting a mixed results from many of the conversations I'm hearing. Again, some are like really pleased and over exceeding, they're exceeding those goals, while others are barely making their goals. What are you seeing and hearing?
Yeah, we even at American Muslim Community Foundation, luckily have had a donor contribute $50,000, but to use it as a match. And we've been very grateful to have a handful of large donors like this individual. But I'd love to have dozens, if not hundreds more at the smaller levels, from $50 to even a few $100. But we just see this big disparity through the last several years. And I'm taking notes, right? Because these are all things that I could be implementing at AMCF. So with our year-end campaign, even though we have this match, it's been a little slower than I would want it to be.
Right.
But yeah, definitely curious to see how others are seeing from Giving Tuesday, launching year-end campaigns. You and I have talked about how we encourage others to start their year-end campaign from Q4, right? Like, don't wait until the last month.
Right.
Sometimes it takes several attempts to get in front of the donors to share different versions of the story, and who the beneficiaries are, getting different testimonials. And we know with marketing, people have to see the message even in a different variety of ways. You can't just stick all your eggs in the email basket or in the direct mail basket or social media. So diversifying that, and also hearing from different beneficiaries or leadership. Maybe as a major gift officer, I can definitely share, but I don't always need to be the one sharing. I can be connecting the donors to a board member, to a program officer, to somebody else to tell the impact of the organization.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, so openly, I love when we have these conversations, because I am seeing, mixed results and responses as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, well, moving on, and I also want to give a shout out. So thank you, Teresa, for sharing what sustainability looks like for you. Again, if anyone else is willing to share what that looks like for them, that sustainability, go ahead and put that in the chat so Teresa can get some knowledge share as well. But I appreciate that, you're really looking at here consistent or growing that attendance at events, programs, no wild swings with big grants and no grants. So I feel ya, Teresa. I get it. Okay, so looking ahead, I want to share about rinse, repeat, recycle. So of course, this is pulled, from recycling and just in general in our life. But why is rinse, repeat, and recycle content so important? I'm going to share that with you. When it boils down, it boils down to these three key areas. We all need to save some time. We're all super busy, 24 hours in a day. And I guarantee you, many of us are working many more hours than maybe we would like to, especially right now with this end of year. It could also help to provide an SEO boost. And one way that I do that, I'm actually celebrating I think it's my 16th year in business. And I have many articles, many blogs, many things that I've shared over the course of that 16 years. So I will even go back to an article that I wrote, and you can do this similarly for your organization. If there's an article that you wrote several years ago, perhaps it's around food insecurity, you can go back to that article. You can refresh it, perhaps using AI, right? Artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, to help you save even more time. Update that so that the article is now relevant for 2024 or even moving into 2025. Again, changing that, reposting, publishing it, multi-channel marketing will help that SEO boost. And then, of course, rinsing, repeating, recycle your content will also help you in scaling that content creation and hopefully expanding that audience reach. As Muhi said, we can't just rest on email nowadays. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of places where we can receive information, including TikTok and, so many others out there, Instagram. I also say you do not have to be on all platforms. So if you need another permission slip, that's a second one for you so far, is that you do not have to be on every single platform, but pick the platform that works for you. And also perhaps pick that platform where you're looking to scale your audience reach. So maybe you are looking at, a new platform to, engage and interact with a younger demographic and what that might look like. So several opportunities there. And I wanted to share from here a little further into that multi-channel marketing and what that looks like. So this, if you scan the QR here on the slide, it'll take you to an article that I wrote last year, and it was all about an end of year fundraising campaign I did for a client of mine, where we delivered 374% growth. Sorry, that's 374% growth over their previous year's end of year campaign. And I did that through the power of multi-channel marketing. I share very transparently in that article what it looked like. I share about how we reach the diverse audience, how we maintain that brand visibility, how we, stay top of mind for these supporters, how we were able to enhance the trust and credibility and amplify that impact. So I will tell you our goal, and if you read the article, our goal was 200,000. We came shy of that by like a handful of thousands. I think it was like shy of 7,000. Got super close, but a 374% increase. And that was all through the power of multi-channel marketing. Probably no surprise to you. This is the same recipe I'm using with my clients now for end of year. And we're still seeing some great response from that. As Muhi alluded, I'm a huge fan that you start your end of year in October 1, and you go all the way through the 1st of January. January, of course, being a gratitude and a thank you for their support. So really looking at that, but again, I want to share tools, resources, anything tangible so that, when you leave today's presentation, or maybe you watch it again on repeat, you're able to go to some of these tools. And I have a few others that I will share. And again, a reminder, some of this might seem so basic, but I've got to tell you, when I see the most success, it is because we have implemented a simple system and we've done it consistently. So consistency, I believe, is key. And that's where I'm seeing that great success.
A really
So
quick note for you
yeah,
on the last slide. Number one, love that your face is on a rocket. Number two, when you talk about January 1st and thank you and gratitude, right? In the 8-step cost selling cycle, the last step is stewardship. And we know stewardship is so critical. It's the most important piece of the pie. If you compare the cost selling cycle to the traditional major gift life cycle, right? Maybe there's cultivation, there's solicitation, there's stewardship in the traditional model. But each of those 8 steps really help you tie in all of these things that Jarrett is talking about. And specifically when it comes to stewardship, it's one of the most important to help you with that donor retention, to help you with showcasing the impact that that gift has made, right? So just a little bit on that.
I love it. And I always talk about ask, think, report, and repeat, right? So it's really 4 steps. You're going to ask for the gift, thank them for the gift, report to them what the gift has done, and then you repeat that cycle or the steps all over again. So thank you for adding that, because yes, all of this is integrated into the entire 8 steps of the cost selling model. So very simple, and I'm going to go through this in the next couple of slides pretty quickly. But here's just, a touch point of things that can be created when you rinse, repeat, recycle. So a couple of things I'll pull out here is, you really can look at podcast. Many of us are doing podcasts. Maybe you're getting invited to be a podcast guest, your CEO, executive director, board chair, whomever. You can pull out like sound bites of those podcasts, and you can do it now pretty simply, pretty easily, right? So you can use that podcast. Maybe it's a 30-minute, 15-minute. You could do like a 30-second snap of that podcast soundbite, and you can share that multiple ways. Listicle, I'll share that here at the bottom. It's the 3rd bullet up from the bottom is listicle. And what that is like the top 10 ways that you can, help to eradicate hunger in our community. So now you've created 10 different touch points or 10 different solutions for your community member. That 10, those 10 items can also be pulled out. So you could do an email series, maybe a 10-week email series that says number 1, number 2, number 3, and you just, pull that listicle. It doesn't have to be 10, it could be 5, it could be 3, but really just sharing that in different ways throughout your collateral, throughout your channels, your multi-platform. So to dive even further into this, for those of you that are visual, I have 2 examples of this that I've worked with clients on. This is an outward example, meaning this was created first, and then the elements were pulled out to be used in all of the multi-channel platforms. So it was included in newsletters, social media, emails, all different ways. So this was, a longer form infographic. Thank you to Canva. It's pretty easy to use. And then you can just change this up. So this one was done first, and then, these pieces were pulled out for later use. This example was the opposite. This is an impact report. I'm very fond of these. These to me are a 2-page infographic that is a condensed version of your larger annual report. So perhaps your annual report, is 4 pages. I've seen upwards of 20 plus pages. But there's opportunities where you can rinse, repeat your recycle your content into other collateral items to really simplify what you're sharing. So this infographic, I got to tell you guys, this is my go-to. So I do an annual report for my clients, but then I simplify into this 2-page. Why? Because this 2-page then gets utilized in so many different ways. I mail it to donors. Again, I'm segmenting and targeting who gets this. Maybe the top donors get the full annual report mailed to them. Maybe a certain level of donors, they get the infographic sent to them or emailed to them, right? If you're not doing USPS and maybe digital is, still perfect for you and your supporters, there's a great way to do that. So this condensed version is also key for those of you that are grant writers. When they give you an opportunity on the grant portal in particular to attach any additional tools, any additional documentation that you would like to share in your grant submission, this is my go-to, right? Not the 8, 12, 20 plus page annual report. This simplified version is my go-to that I will upload because it provides so much data in a very simple, visually appealing opportunity. So this one done at the last, you're then pulling in the data throughout the year as opposed to the previous example that I gave you. So again, not rocket science, but I certainly want to share these tools so that you're working, we've all heard it, smarter, not harder, because we all have so many things going on, so many, deadlines, commitments, both personal and professional to manage. The other thing to help you with your rinse, repeat, recycle your content is the more evergreen content you have, the better, right? So if it's not time stamped, if it doesn't say, here's exactly what happened in 2024, there could be sound bites, there could be testimonials, there could be ways in which you can use that content if it's not stamped or time sensitive. And that's what I mean by evergreen. And hopefully that's not a new term for you. But you really can utilize so many great, content from video, from success stories, from photos throughout your year. In fact, I just helped an organization do their end of year video, and we made sure that it was evergreen because guess what? Financial resources are limited, and we weren't sure if next year we would have the same ability to use those same financial resources. So we worked with the videographer to make sure that, we didn't necessarily use the current executive director, our board chair, our staff. We really leaned into the participants of the program, the partners of the program, and those volunteers that are part of the program. So that helped us to really, expand and leverage how we use that storytelling, how we use that content, and then how we might be able to use it over and over and over again by keeping it evergreen. So that's a huge trick of mine. Muhi, I'm curious, how much evergreen content are you using?
Yeah, I think in our programs, we have Muslim Philanthropy Awards, which models after Association of Fundraising Professionals Philanthropy Day. So we are able to use that one program to develop a lot of content for all of the different award categories, for all of the different nominees, and then the award winners. So it really allows us to engage in a more effective way. And I will tell you that those posts were the most liked, the most shared, the most commented, and even on social media, inviting and tagging those people who were nominated as collaborators on the post, so it shows on their people as well. So it's really allowed us to, when you talk about examine performance, see what that is, and then also track in that month that we held that event, how many new followers did we get, and all of those things. So for us, it's definitely important to have that evergreen content. And even with your examples of the outward and inward, it's kind of creating what thought pieces can we leave behind, right? And for us, it's looking into almost like a Spotify Wrapped, right? Everybody has their listening top five of, different genres and albums and songs and artists. But what were the top five impacts that you were able to make with the number of donations you received, with the number of donors that you had supporting, with the number of beneficiaries, and then sharing that information back to them.
I love that. And I love that correlation, like back to Spotify, because I also love, and I can get super nerdy of this, but like benchmarking other industries, right? Like what are other industries doing and how might we adapt that and adopt that into our industry? And you're right, going back to see where do we perform, fantastically? Where are we getting the most engagements? That might be some of the content, right, that you continue to look at for that evergreen, and that will help to shape and drive that for your future. So, okay, now is the time I want to share moving into that 12-month content calendar, because this will help you, again, smarter, not harder, really figuring out what is it we want to implement over the next 12 months. Now, again, thank you, because I know we're still in December. We're still, hustling for this end of year all the way through December 31. So I'm asking you to look ahead into the next, calendar year. This is another resource. It's a simple resource, back to basics, that I use with my clients. And I wanted to share with you a couple of things that I hear from people when they use this tool. And you'll see it is literally pen to paper. Of course, you can put this into a digital format, but I still find pen to paper to be very helpful. But people tell me how helpful it is for them to put everything into this worksheet and see it visually into this like annual snapshot. Board members say the same thing. And I want to tell you, no disrespect, because I know everyone's working really hard, but I hear often from my clients that the board members were shocked, truly surprised to see just how busy our teams were. Right? So again, we know that. I know, Muhi, I see your face. You're like, oh, imagine that. This is a great visual representation. And if you choose to move it digital, kudos to you. But I also tell my clients, when your board member comes over and says, hey, we should do this Super Bowl event, fundraising event, and you show them, I'm going to say the board member's name is Nick. Nick, that's a great idea. Here's our current fundraising calendar. Here's everything we have going on for the next 12 months. Where do you suggest us squeezing that in, right, to be profitable and successful for an event? I hear this often, and then the staff goes, oh my gosh, that helped me so much, because the board member was like, I had no idea that we have all this going on. So use this as a tool. This is meant to help for that. And then it will also help you really figure out those data-driven decision making. I love, Muhi, that you also referenced in your previous share how you go back to see the analytics of social posts, the analytics of, emails and things like that. That is data-driven decision making. So you're going back to leverage the insights, the numbers, the like brass tacks that so many of these platforms, whether it's your donor database, whether it's your email, system, there's so many ways to lean into this, but truly understanding how to identify and then how to leverage those key metrics so that you can analyze, right? I've got these highlighted for a reason. Your organization performance will truly inform, right, those strategic initiatives. I've been around the block a lot. I know that many of us, still are making decisions kind of on the fly or in haste. Many of us are still throwing that spaghetti on the wall and just hoping and praying that it sticks, right? Maybe we're just making some intuitive decisions. But again, I really, really, really want you to look into your metrics, because that is a great opportunity. And if you're thinking, what are these metrics, Jarrett? Where do I start? I'm very visual, so I wanted to provide this visual representation of either a leading KPI, key performance indicator, or a lagging KPI measurement. Now, this probably does not come as a surprise, but I recommend you choosing a couple from each, a couple from leading, a couple from lagging, because combined, that will really, help you determine what's your current state and where are we headed. So for example, I will share with you a lagging is something that happened in the past. Maybe that was your paddle raiser, right? Maybe it was the attendance at your gala. That is a lagging KPI because it's something that has already happened. It happened in the past. A leading KPI will predict that future performance. So it's something that will be happening and you're forecasting that for you. So real quick, I've got one more poll for us here. And I want to know about, what you're tracking when it comes to metrics regularly. Yes, you're tracking regularly, or nope, not so much regularly. I thought about having a third one, which obviously I don't if you're participating in the poll, but the third one would be track what?
What does that mean?
Right. Should we be doing that? Okay, so I love it. What I'm seeing the majority of you is yes, regularly. So that is fantastic. And I also, I empathize with those of you that are saying, no, not so regularly. I would venture to guess it is because we are also busy and it comes down to a capacity issue. But the majority of you are absolutely saying, yes, we do track and we do analyze metrics regularly. So kudos to you. I am really glad to hear that. All right. Let's see here. Well, thank you for participating in that. Let me get my screen working for me. Get this canceled. All right. So when we think of metrics that you might consider, if you're looking at the slide right now, you'll see that I also bolded a few that you might want to consider tracking. What I will say, right, is to pick a few, don't overcomplicate it. And again, you should pick the ones that are being implemented currently for your organizations or your departments' goals and objectives. So let's do a little knowledge sharing in that chat box. I would love to know what your organization, what you are currently measuring. So if you would just play with me for a little bit, we've got that chat box and you can enter in there what you are measuring when it comes to metrics. I'd really like to hear from those of you joining me today. And then also, again, there's so much power in knowledge sharing as a community, and I'd love for us to all learn from one another. So take some time. I'm going to take another sip of my hot tea here, but let me know, what are the metrics that you're currently measuring at your organization?
Cheers while we do that. This is one of those slides that I feel is worthy of a screenshot to, get your camera out, and there's so much information here. Each of these topics could be a webinar in and of itself, going into fine detail of what each of these are and defining what these metrics mean, why they're important. Should they be part of major gift officers' metrics of how they are rated for their performance bonuses, for being considered for promotions, all of those things. So it's even more than just about increasing the retention rate or gifts of your portfolio, but really ways of how you can leverage the impact of your staff. So I would like to think of these from both perspectives of managing teams, but then also managing your donors.
Absolutely. And yes, please take a screenshot. You will, of course, get a recording, so you'll have access to this, but feel free to take a screenshot if that would be helpful. Any and all of this is yours for the taking. So we've got some chatter here. I would love to share what some of you are tracking. So Teresa, participation award, my friend. Track attendance, tickets, donations, and post-event donations. You also track the total donors annually, as well as the recurring donor. Fantastic. I love that. And hopefully too, if you have a development fundraising committee, right, like this is being shared with those members and therefore also shared with the full board. Matthew, some of what you're tracking regularly: contact reports overall, reports for portfolio, 80%, and then weighted. Added prospects for potential major gift returns. Fantastic. Current through next 2 seasons. And achieving annual revenue goals. Fantastic. Matthew, thank you so much. The other thing I'll share here, I do some coaching, like one-on-one executive coaching, and I have had, again, the gamut, right? Like organizations that are startups, even if they're 20 years old, organizations that are very mature and their systems are just so robust. So I've worked with many of you that have said, you know what? We don't really have KPIs that we track, or my boss or CEO, whomever, like hasn't really assigned me any to track. So I encourage you to pick your own, right? Like choose these for yourself. If you haven't been given some of these to track as a performance of your department or even your individual responsibility, I highly encourage you to pick some of these, track them on your own. And again, this is a great opportunity for you to share with your supervisor, your team, and others what that looks like. So I just kind of wanted to share the whole spectrum because I know many of us inherit KPIs and metrics that we need to track. And many of us are saying, yeah, that'd be great. Like, where do I even start? So a little bit
Yeah,
about.
and you get to, determine what suits you best, and what are your strengths. Maybe in the role that you have, you don't have as robust of a portfolio. Maybe you just started in a new role and it's going to take some time to build that trust with the organization, making a first great impression. All of those things will lead into translating some of these different metrics. And what you can do, and kind of to Julia's point, on tracking what messaging generates donations from lapsed people within the last 3 months, or even the last few years and past donors, is testing out different methods of communication, but also figuring out what method of communication your donors actually prefer. Do they want phone calls? Do they want emails? Do they want snail mail, direct mail? Or are they comfortable with text messages, right? After some time, I think you can develop a rapport that can strengthen your relationship with the donor, but more importantly, the donor's relationship with the mission of your work. So it's about taking the time to build that trust. And some of you may be seasoned into a portfolio that's 3 years or 5 years, and you really have that dialed in. So you can use some of these other metrics to further those conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So yes, Julia, thank you. Tracking the messaging that generates donations that Muhi just said. And I love that you're focused on the last 3 months. So, you're right in line, of course, with that end of year fundraising. So kudos to you as well as those past donors. Matthew chimes in again, that ROI at events, and you're really looking for a minimum goal of 4-to-1. These are great, truly great metrics. I love to see and hear that many of you are tracking, analyzing, and leaning into data-driven decisions, right? Because that is what's going to help you, support you. Again, just all too often I see, and I still hear, that we are just throwing spaghetti on the walls and just saying, I hope that sticks. Or we're choosing a metric 1 year or even quarter, and we're not staying the course on tracking that metric over and over and over again. Another resource I share, feel free to take this as you wish. As you'll see, a lot of the tools and resources I use are pretty simplistic. You can make them a little bit more advanced and enhanced, and I have done that, again, mostly digitally. But this is another great snapshot of your financial success, what's worked and what hasn't worked. I will say since COVID, since March of 2020, I do encourage you to go back 4 years, perhaps, so that you can really see what your financials in these different buckets look like. So feel free to take a screenshot of this, build out your own in Excel if you prefer. You might be able to fill out these numbers yourself. If not, please feel free to go to your treasurer, your bookkeeper, accountant to help with this. Filling out each and every one of these lines will really help you to identify that funding at a glance. Again, that snapshot view. Where are we? What worked? Why didn't it work? And then where I get super nerdy is we look at where there's variance, right? Whether it's a variance in the upward direction or a variance in the downward direction, and start to make narrative notes on there as to why we think there was a variance, right? Perhaps for this last year, we want to make a note that there was a presidential campaign that tends to impact fundraising dollars. Obviously in 2020, 2021, 2022, many of us, of course, we're still getting back to a normal kind of routine post-COVID or still during COVID. And really just having those notes, because I am huge on institutional knowledge and sharing that knowledge from, team after team, year after year, because for us as professional fundraisers, we are doing our darndest to leave a legacy for the future fundraisers. And so I'm huge on institutional knowledge for that reason, is that we capture this data. We put it in our drives wherever we have it, anyway, but we're sharing this year after year. So no one is starting in our position and going, where the heck do I start? Which way is up? If I only had these numbers. So again, this is another resource. The board loves to see this as well. Another visual representation. And I use the stoplight approach on this. So once I fill out all of the numbers, I really start to say, okay, what is working well? And we've seen that trend year over year as a successful, opportunity. We're going to highlight that, or we're going to, change that color to green. If it's in Excel, it's pretty easy to do that. And then if it's a yellow, that means it's not quite, negative, which it would be red, and it's not quite, excelling into that green category. So it's a caution, that yellow. And then of course the red is, whoa, hold up, something is not working here. We need to go back to basics, perhaps go back to see, why are we losing these donors? If that's a donor retention, where are we losing them? Maybe it's attendance at some of these events, and really start to identify what is working, what's not working, what is on the brink of working or the cusp of failing, and then how might we change, the way we approach this going forward from this data, right? Looking at this to say, is this something we want to continue, yay or nay, and why? Or is this not something we continue? And if not, then how do we sunset that? How do we communicate it? Or is there something else that we want to put in its place? I've worked with several organizations this last year in the Metro Phoenix area, which have decided to sunset their galas, right? There's pros and cons in that, friends. There are pros in the fact where, it's not a heavy lift at a certain time of the year. All of the work that goes into those large productions, but the negative or the downside is you have potential of losing those individual donations that come at that dedicated time for that dedicated event. But again, a snapshot like this, and I wanted to share some pretty basic resources for you, because I know it is easy to get overwhelmed and to overcomplicate that. I'm just as guilty, right? Like, shiny object, let's do this new tech stack. Let's figure out what's working, what's not working. And sometimes just pen to paper, getting down to basics is what's needed. Muhi, I'd love to know from
Yeah.
you, kind of looking at this, what stands out to you?
Well, real life example, just before this call, I had a executive coaching session with the executive director. And she was saying, I'm trying to get my board more engaged, but they really think that our goal should be arbitrary number, and it's like, okay, but what's the science behind that? We know that development is the science and art of fundraising, right? So I literally told her, to make this same chart. What are your last 3 years telling you? What data is informing a decision that you can make a sound goal, a smart goal, an achievable goal, rather than just, again, throwing spaghetti, seeing what sticks on the wall. Just had spaghetti earlier today. So just looking at, what is, how some of these goals come up. And, even working at larger institutions in the past, I wonder how these goals came to fruition. Did they look at the data and what is the data telling us, informing us? Because if you look at again, we talked about attrition and retention. If we look at how many overall donors there have been and what the trends are telling us, then we can make a more informed decision. So absolutely, whether it is to nix the gala or maybe do something virtual instead of in person, there's a lot of institutions that are moving towards that trend as well that I've seen. And you have to think about all of the staff time that's put into behind the scenes to put these events together. And yes, the old adage, it takes money to make money. I fully support, all of that, and think that there's a justification to operational costs. But if you invest that time and strategy into long-term development, relationship advancement, I think that there would be a far higher return on those. And there's still got to be some strategy for an annual fund. And maybe that's just a better place for those people who typically show up to an event and give in that way. But I think the opportunity for curated relationships, deepening connections, and creating a major gift program where there are people in a portfolio, regardless of whether you're a new organization and a major gift is only $1,000 versus a long-standing organization where it's a lot higher. So yeah, just some thoughts.
Great insights. I love it. And I did love when you were here in town visiting, because we nerded out, right? About personal passions, professional passions. And I know we could keep nerding out for a long time. One thing that I don't have on here, and I realize it, and it kind of dovetails into two areas: direct mail and email campaign. I have used those to help make decisions with my clients on whether we continue to include a remittance envelope into their direct mail solicitations. The majority of my clients are nixing the envelope, and they're simply adding a QR code, right? And so that has cut down cost. And on some occasions, it's also cut down, on that postage, depending on the weight of the material that you're sending. But these are all great ways to help you shift and shape data-driven decisions based off of the data that you have. So again, looking to see how many people are sending those remittance envelopes back versus an email campaign. Maybe you, like many of these other organizations, can remove that remittance envelope, which, as we all know, is additional paper, additional print, additional cost, right? That small change could be a big impact for your bottom line. And again, just kind of knowing where your donors are giving, how they're making that contribution is really big. One thing we don't talk about here, and Muhi, I'm going to put you on the spot, as well as all of you that are also still with me today, is I'm curious about donor surveys, right? So I would love to know, Muhi, for you to share, and then our other participants to chime in via chat. Have you used donor surveys? And is that something, this is going to be a multifold question, is that something you do regularly? And what has come of those surveys if you've done it? So Muhi, you're on the spot since you can chat with me.
Yeah, for sure. I think annually is a good cadence. And we do ask questions around communication preferences. But then since at AMCF, we have giving circles that we operate. We talk to them about if they're interested and if they also have a will, if they've left charities in their will, so we can help with planned giving and other types of questions that provide us with information that we necessarily wouldn't have. In some of these, we also try to do ask for their birthday so that we have that as a cultivation technique. We also ask for if they're interested in providing referrals of people who might be interested in our work. So really to make our life easier, we do this survey, and it helps us have more informed, direct conversations. And I'd say there isn't a huge response rate, but it allows for deepened connections for those that do fill it out.
Yeah. And when in the year do you send it? Well, I want to say in relation to your fiscal.
Yeah, that's a good question. Some years we've done it in year end, and other years, because a lot of our donors also give in Ramadan, we maybe do it before or after that, and we've seen good engagement there as well. I recall when we did it in year end, sometimes it got lost in the shuffle of things, and maybe those years um, it wasn't as high of a response rate. But the pre-Ramadan or post-Ramadan did work well for us. And we used the post-Ramadan to inform our strategy for the following year. But the pre-Ramadan to inform us of just like for later on in that year as well.
Very smart. Yeah, I was thinking for organizations that might have a calendar end, maybe, late January, early February could be a good time so it doesn't get lost in the mix. But again, just leveraging those data insights, optimize your fundraising strategy. Hopefully you've enjoyed and found helpful and valuable the tools and resources, even, some basics into this conversation to take it further, a little bit about those donor surveys. I know some databases have that integrated as a template into the email communication. So it might be as simple as looking to see what your current donor database has for a preset template for a donor survey. And then of course, from there, you can customize it. But yeah, great insight. Again, thank you for being here at the end of 2024, still in the haste and the holiday chaos, to talk about next year. So that was a big lift. I know I was asking a lot because all of us are super busy in the end of year. That's it for me. I would love to open it up, Muhi, for any questions from our friends that are with us. If you have any hot seat questions, you've got two of us here, myself and Muhi, to help answer any questions that you might have. And I'm going to be so, brave and bold to say, even if it's beyond today's conversation. Of course, today's webinar is what we're talking about. But if there's anything kind of burning desire, anything that has come up for you, you've got both of us nerds here willing to help and assist for end of year.
Absolutely. And our star participant, Julia, again, shared her insights around donor surveys. So I just want to put that in there. And she says, we just did a huge donor survey as we were doing our strategic plan, which was really insightful as to what donors were looking for. It prompted us to change our messaging and donor tagline to "It starts with you." All of our messaging really emphasizes the importance and impact of their gift renewal overall support. Absolutely. When you're doing a strategic plan, you definitely want to hear from your constituencies, and donors are definitely one of the most important constituencies, if not the most, outside of beneficiaries and board members and volunteers and all of those wonderful people who make our organizations run.
And thank you, Julia. I just want to chime in and echo Muhi. Thank you. That was great to hear. Love to see how it prompted you to make that messaging change. It likely wasn't a huge overhaul, but just a slight, tweak could make all the difference. So great practical example. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll give it a second to see if anybody has placed questions into the chat or into the Q&A feature. But as always, definitely Jarrett has a wide variety of expertise outside of this topic as well. So whatever is on your mind, truly do share. But we'll give it just another moment. Here's an opportunity for you to connect with Jarrett and myself on LinkedIn. Just drop in Fundraising Academy webinar if you're connecting, so I know to accept it and that we were connected through this webinar opportunity. You can, of course, scan the QR code to join Fundraising Academy's email list. We would love to stay connected with you on your journey as a nonprofit fundraiser.
Yeah. You want to share about their certificate? Because this is exciting.
Absolutely. So this is Fundraising Academy's brand new certificate program. The Fundraising Essentials Certificate is a 125-hour flexible, modular, asynchronous certificate to help busy fundraisers like you and I meet our professional development goals. These certificates are available individually or in bulk at a reduced rate for your fundraising team. So definitely scan this QR code if you are interested in learning more. Wonderful. Well, with that being said as well, we would also love for you to register in our online learning portal. It is absolutely free at no cost. You get access to all of the past webinars, and this one will be loaded into there in a few weeks as well. And we want to make sure that you register for the portal. We've dropped the link into the chat. And next month in January, we will be having a workshop. And the key takeaways for this workshop are going to be about learning the components of a development assessment and understanding why conducting one is an important part of a thriving fundraising program. It's going to be with the philanthropy coach, Hannah Berger, and she's going to be providing templates to assist in data collection and analysis so that you can gain a better idea of how your data collection can drive programming, resource allocation, donor engagement, and so much more. So actually very in tune with what we learned today. So we want you to be able to engage in real-time knowledge exchange. That's the difference in the workshop. It's very interactive with the participants. And you will get more information on how you can complete an effective development assessment.
Yeah, you're right. It's a great complement to today's conversation. Real quick, I want to shout out the portal, and I'll go back to that, the online learning portal. In fact, Fundraising Academy just published the December blog article, and it is written by me, and it complements today's conversation. So today's webinar. So again, if you are visual, you want to, absorb a little bit more of this and get even nerdier with me, look on the portal, check out the blogs. You'll see the December article, and it is all about today's conversation. And yes, it does dovetail perfectly. I think that was designed on purpose, right? To really advance the January workshop with Hannah. So she's fantastic. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, big thank you to Jarrett Ransom for leading us through today's conversation. I know I learned a lot. Thank you to everybody in the audience for your time and your participation. And to help us continuously improve our monthly webinar series and ensure that we are providing value, we would like to give you a survey. So please take a few minutes to fill that out, and it will appear at the end of the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Muhi.